Hi, welcome back to my channel and the series I'm doing just now called Maladaptive Daydreaming, and today I'm going to be discussing maladaptive daydreaming and writing. These are two things that are been really big factors in my life, and I just wanted to talk about the way they interact and the way I've heard that they interact for other people, and how to strike a balance between creativity and escapism, and if that's even possible. So the first thing I want to say is that for me personally, my maladaptive daydreaming was always really different from my writing. I never wrote about things that I maladaptive daydreamed about. Like, the maladaptive daydream was just occur. It was compulsive. It was on like a particular theme, particular topic, and it wasn't something that I would, put pen to paper over. It was more, I particularly just had like more daily, basically it was not interesting enough to be a novel or to write about. It was more a replacement, I think, for real life was my maladaptive daydreaming, or is my maladaptive daydreaming, I will say, because I've been sick this week, so I actually have been maladaptive daydreaming. I know for a lot of other people though, writing is a little bit more linked to their maladaptive daydreaming, and they create worlds that then they're able to write about. In particular, I'd come across this term called parasocial, which is not something I knew about, but it's like when you create, a really vast world and you can maladaptive daydream in it, or you can write about it. It can be something positively creative, or it could be something negatively creative. And actually, the reason I was thinking about this topic is I was watching a video about this TikToker, and you might have heard of this, a girl called Audra Winter, and she has been working on a book for a long time, and somebody in the comments kind of noticed that it was likely to be her paracosm, because she talked about how, that world that she created was like a safe space for her, and it sounded more like something that she would like maladaptive daydream in, as opposed to, something that you would release and be your novel. And I was thinking about, a lot of people are maybe not even aware of that line between creativity and their maladaptive daydreaming, and maybe writing and daydreaming are all part of the same fixation for people. Like, for me, they've been very separate, and I've been thinking about my writing over the years, and writing for me was actually like a safe space away from the maladaptive daydreaming, because writing felt very productive, and when I was using my imagination in order to come up with stories, in order to write, that felt very productive, and it felt very much like I was doing something. Whereas when I'm maladaptive daydreaming, I'm conscious of, time wasting, and just, not living life. Because I want to be a writer, and that was the main thing for me. If I was using my imagination in that way, I saw it as a good thing. I think what's interesting is that I saw that as almost like, somebody else could be like, oh, you're still living in your head and you're creating stories, and I'll be like, well, yes, but actually it serves a purpose, because I was going to write that story down, and I was going to edit the story and refine it, and I wanted it read. Like, for me, like, that all has purpose, and maladaptive daydreaming doesn't have purpose. That's the way I would differentiate them for me. So I always felt like writing was a positive use of my imagination, taking me away from maladaptive daydreaming. But interestingly, as I've been getting help for maladaptive daydreaming, and I've been doing that less, I kind of thought, this is now going to free up the space in my mind to use my imagination in a really positive way. But I think because I've been doing really well in terms of like living in the moment and feeling just more generally healthy, when I'm thinking, oh, I should now start, making things up, and I should start using my imagination again, and I sometimes wonder, I'm like, is this healthy now? Is this what I should be doing. I doubt myself now that I should be encouraging myself to make up stories, even though like that is what I want to do. And I think, that's been really concerning for me, because I want to be working on the stories and I want to be writing and I want to be creating, so I don't want to have this pull away from using my imagination. And I think, the line between creativity and escapism, I think, for people prone to maladaptive daydreaming, prone to wanting to escape in their mind, it is, a balancing act that only, I think, like, you can understand, like, what works for you and like what's going to be healthy for you. I think, because I've been doing really well and I've been working on not maladaptive daydreaming, I kind of feel, am I causing myself like some temptation? We want to really protect that creative side of ourselves and not let that go. And I don't know, for other people, maybe people maladaptive daydreaming, they also don't have a creative outlet. Like, you might not maladaptive daydreaming, you might not write or do anything creatively productive, and therefore, the thought of losing your maladaptive daydreaming is almost like the thought of losing your creative self. And I think that would be really concerning for me, and that's where it's important, really to be able to think about how can you use your imagination in a positive way, or in a way that's going to make you feel good, in a way that's going to keep you healthy. And I think writing, even if you're just journaling or you're just writing down your stories, I mean, when I hear about this parasocial thing that people have, and like they create these worlds in order to maladaptive daydream in them, my feeling is, why don't you write this down and create something from that? But that's like easy for me to say, like from a distance. I just think, because the way I maladaptive daydreamed, it wasn't worth writing down. But when I've seen people describe like more elaborate worlds, I think, well, that is worth writing down and creating something. It's having an imagination is really, it is a wonderful thing, and you don't want to lose that, because you are prone to it taking over your life, in the sense of the way maladaptive daydreaming does take over our lives. You want to also like cherish that little piece of you that can create these worlds, or create these storylines, and that imagination can come very easily for you. You want to somehow capture that. So I think, like, if you do maladaptive daydream and you don't write, I would recommend you try to write and see if writing down your stories has some kind of positive impact for you, and like maybe you'll find a more sustainable, more positive creative outlet for yourself. And then if you maladaptive daydream and write in the way that I always have, then it's really about finding the balance between how and when you use your imagination. I mean, for me, it's it's quite a strange thing, because I really don't. I can come up with story ideas, but they would never run. They never like run wild in my mind the way maladaptive daydreaming does. It never. I would really very much need to consciously think about what I'm writing, and consciously I tend to think scene by scene, and it feels it feels like an effort. It feels like a creative endeavour, as opposed to what maladaptive daydreaming is, which is just storylines that kind of take over and just exist there, and they come so easily. And I sometimes used to think, oh God, if I could write all of this down. I mean, it's kind of like fan fiction, really. Like, if I was writing that down, it would be probably just like a stream of consciousness, and probably one scene over and over again, like The Shining. So yeah, I think it's just all about harnessing creativity in a way that's positive and in a way that can produce things. And I don't know, I think there's different ways to look at this, because you might think that you don't need to produce something to enjoy your imagination, and I kind of, I agree with that to a certain extent. And I know, there's such a thing as immersive daydreaming, which, people will daydream in the same way as maladaptive daydreamers, but it's been considered, a positive thing, because, it's not overtaking their life. It's not something that they see as negative, and, they have a lot more control over it. But, it's just something they enjoy doing. So again, if you're able to turn your maladaptive daydreaming into some sort of positive version of daydreaming, that could work for you as well. Like, I think probably there is a link between maladaptive daydreaming and writers. I think probably there'll be a lot of writers, because as well, there's probably a big crossover between people, who struggle with anxiety and who write. People who are not so, like, good in the real world. They're not, like, obviously if you're very social and you can live very positively in the real world, maybe you don't feel called to write in the way, people who struggle. And this is the thing about, artists and mental health, because, of course, being an artist, being creative, or, being somebody who struggles in the real world in certain ways, you're obviously, like, turn in on yourself, and you look for ways to express yourself. And, that there's obviously, like, a strong line between that and maladaptive daydreaming. So I think there probably will be, like, a link between people who write and people who maladaptive daydream. But, please do leave a comment and let me know if this is something that you resonate with. Are you a writer also maladaptive daydreams, and where do you draw the line? For me, I'm in this place where I'm, like, reframing and trying to create the boundaries of how I'll use my imagination and how I'll live in the real world, and how, I'll feel present. And therefore, the writing needs to be, a very strict time and very strict kind of use of my imagination. That's the way I'm feeling just now about how, I'm going to navigate this and really ensure that I stay healthy, because even though I know that writing and maladaptive daydreaming were very separate to me when I was maladaptive daydreaming very heavily, now that I'm not maladaptive daydreaming as much, I do worry, like, if I, pursue writing, pursue creativity, am I, like, opening a doorway just to get back into maladaptive daydreaming? I like, worry about where that line is for me, and, how do I, like, protect my creativity when I also want to, just live freely and live more in the moment and become more present. But for me, like, being present and being my true self would be being a creative and being a writer and being somebody engaged in my imagination. So, it's really, I think it's quite a complex subject. And if you do maladaptive daydream and you do write, please do leave a comment and let me know, like, how you balance things. And I'm really sorry, I thought my throat was a bit, I've not been feeling well, and I thought my throat was okay to make a video, but I hope this hasn't been too difficult to listen to. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I have a whole playlist now of these maladaptive daydreaming and videos, so please do check them out, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!